Hello, my name's Amrita Mukherjee and I'm in the School of Law at the University of Leeds, and I'm really honoured today to be giving the lecture for the research conference on the Sustainable Development Goals. And my lecture is going to be examining the promise that no one will be left behind. You know, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals of 2015 state this important promise. And so I'm going to be exploring how that promise is actually articulated within the goals, and what they give us, what they add in relation to global governance in particular. So I run a program, a master's program in the School of Law on international law and global governance. So we're going to be exploring the structure of the system that Agenda 2030 set up, the 17 sustainability development goals, which were introduced in 2015. Important definition, firstly, of sustainable development is given under the agenda. It states that it's a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So this is an important aspect of the development goals, that they are very much also about reaching to ensure and support future generations. So implementation efforts are very much about inclusivity, are about empowerment, and we'll be exploring how these work in relation to massive inequality gaps globally, nationally, regionally. So the stated intention is very much about reaching the most vulnerable segments of society and leaving no one behind. So let's then move on to considering the three pillars that the sustainability system relies upon, rests on. So social, economic and environmental sustainabilities. So these three pillars are really about referring to people, profits and planet, and about ensuring harmony. So the recognition really that you can't get anywhere without these three elements, and you know, to produce harmony in society, on the planet, you know, we need to work together. So the idea then is to integrate, balance and reconcile the pillars, which is a very complex process and has not been fully articulated. So each pillar is sort of developed from different theoretical frameworks and approaches, which, as writers have noted, hampers a more rigorous application of sustainability, first of all. So the goals themselves, I'm sure you'll all be familiar with them. They're set out here, and certainly they represent a hugely crucial aim to address our many current and developing problems across the world, and how, of course, they interconnect they're very to interdependent, and so we must work in that interconnected fashion in order to reach them. But it's this promise of leaving no one behind and reaching to ensure the furthest behind also come first. So this is stated in Goal 10 of the SDGs, and the SDGs are intended to be therefore implemented in a manner that leaves no one behind, and it's an inclusive term. In other words, the inclusion of everyone is central to achieving sustainability. And this is all set out in a General Assembly resolution 71 of the 25th of September 2015, which is titled Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Now, I just want to read out two important paragraphs under that resolution that I think we must concentrate on, we must sort of decipher. So paragraph 4 states that as we embark on this collective journey, we pledge that no one will be left behind. Recognizing that the dignity of the human person is fundamental, we wish to see the goals and targets met for all nations and peoples and for all segments of society. And we will endeavour to reach the furthest behind first. So that's paragraph 4. Paragraph 23 then states, people who are vulnerable must be empowered. Those whose needs are reflected in the agenda include all children, youth, persons with disabilities, people living with HIV/AIDS, older persons, indigenous peoples, refugees, and internally displaced persons and migrants. We resolve to take further effective measures and actions in conformity with international law to remove obstacles and constraints, strengthen support, and meet the special needs of people living in areas affected by complex humanitarian emergencies and in areas affected by terrorism. So the SDGs present a unique opportunity to ensure that all people are fully included in future developments. But just how inclusive are the terms of the 2030 Agenda? Just as a backdrop, an important backdrop, inequalities are deepening and hardening, and we know this from the experiences that we have seen in relation to COVID-19 over the last year and a half. But even before then, we know there have been problems of gender inequality, weakened health systems, humanitarian crises, LGBTQ people facing huge discrimination problems in their lives, refugees and migrants the same, indigenous peoples, all the problems that poverty brings in every place on the planet, and also the problems faced by people with disabilities. So inequalities are based on a number of different factors, including in relation to income, sex, age, disability, sexual orientation, race, class, ethnicity, religion, and opportunity, and they continue to persist everywhere. So, what is the UN saying about this? Well, we do have a Committee for Development Policy 2018, and that is an important institution that has given us a little bit more insight into what needs to be done. And I think this is why I'll just state a few of their recommendations. So, to leave no one behind, they state, it's necessary to address extreme intra and international inequalities. So this isn't just about inequalities between states, but also about growth that only benefits small portions of a population. Yeah. Also about the concentration of income, wealth, and political power, the link between economic and social exclusion and decision-making power, including by ensuring, and this is a really important point, I think, the respect, protection, and fulfillment of human rights. Now, we're going to look a little bit further at that important point, but also about the reorienting of institutions so that policy is driven from the bottom up. You know, when we say bottom, we mean those people who are marginalised and who are most deprived and disadvantaged. So they need to be very much part of any policy agenda, any policy making, any rolling out, of policy, because they do directly relate to them, and so many times they are ignored. And governments need not only to remove barriers to political and civic participation, but also to actively ensure that they are accountable to all citizens, both through formal processes and through other accountability mechanisms such as free press, access to information, meaningful stakeholder participation instances, and all levels of policy making and access to justice. So, this really tells us how it is crucial to any part of the SDG system that disadvantaged people are actively brought in, are listened to, policies do respond to their needs, and therefore that things change, that structural changes occur to allow for these developments. So now focusing on the SDGs themselves, the SDGs were devised in a very a special way. Many stakeholders were involved in a quite a unique process to decide on the SDGs. So a lot of work went into them, but still we see, and there are reasons why we see the following failures in relation to the coverage. So the main ones that I'm just going to make reference to and look in detail at one is in relation to failing to address the distinctive rights of Indigenous peoples. So no reference is made to international declarations and ILO work on Indigenous peoples' rights, which are so important to understanding, the ways of life of Indigenous people and how they are removed from those ways of life. So Indigenous people suffer disproportionate poverty, exclusion, human rights abuses everywhere. And they are often treated as impediments to economic development in many contexts and face ongoing human rights abuses by the very entities implementing SDGs, states, corporations. These are the bodies that are actually abusing their rights, and so important the SDGs do something to recognise that's lifted out, but it doesn't happen. Also, there's a failure to make reference to the UN Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. So, there's a real sort of gender issue here as well in relation to the SDGs that, again, is so surprising. There's also failure to make reference to sexual orientation, gender identity and expression. I mean, that is a huge flaw. Again, we see why that happened. Many states don't want to recognise these rights. Also, in relation to human rights in general, states under the SDGs are only obliged to respect, protect, and promote. So promote rather than fulfill obligations. So in legal terms, that means this is a lesser requirement. If you have to promote, then, you show you're doing something rather than actually fulfilling those obligations. So this results in a reduction in the impact of human rights in relation to the SDGs. So the SDG commitment, though, generally, and I think there is something in this, despite these failures, is about empowerment and promotion of the social, economic, and political inclusion of all, irrespective of age, sex, disability, race, ethnicity, the origin, religion, or economic or other status. So this is under one of the targets, target 10.2. So, you could say there is some recognition of these points, but really not a full commitment, not really engaging properly with the points made. So really, it's recognised in international human rights and anti-discrimination work that in order to reduce substantive inequality, to ensure a substantive equality, we need to be ensuring that we are correcting disadvantage, that we are challenging and addressing stigma, stereotyping, prejudice, and aggression. So, the SDGs, I think, could make more mention of these very important points. Also about enabling voice and participation, and very much about accommodating difference and achieving structural change. And, it's been recognised that these things need to be done all together at the same time, not in a piecemeal way, but, all effort needs to be made towards ensuring that this occurs, that the advocacy of these groups is also very critical to help the inclusion of all in the agenda of SDGs. So I'll end here and hope you all a really successful conference, and looking forward to meeting you when we return to university. Bye.